Welcome to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we are going to be breaking down playoffs. The NHL playoffs are set. We're going to go through the first round, break down every single matchup, decide the winners in the East and the West, as well as Stanley Cup champions. We're also going to talk about the NBA play-in games that are happening tonight, the winner-go-home matchups between the Bulls and the Heat and the Kings and the Pelicans. We'll break all of that down, and in the fourth segment, if we have time, we will break down a little bit of Jaden Daniels news. But let's just get right into it. But remember, before we do, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there where you're watching for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. All you need to do is go to that link that's on the screen right now, and you can control what we talk about. Once again, gsmcpodcast.net to leave that tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give, and we appreciate you all for sticking around and watching. But let's just get right into it. Lots of breakdowns, lots of predictions. We have the battles for the 8 seeds tonight in the NBA. The final play-in games are starting as the NBA playoffs start tomorrow. So we did a whole breakdown of the NBA playoffs earlier in the week if you want to go back and watch that, as well as breaking down every single play-in game that there has been so far. But tonight we have the Bulls taking on the Heat, and that's the first game of the night. That's going to take place at 7, so in just about an hour and a half, or just about when we finish up with our show here today. We are going right into some basketball. The Miami Heat taking on the Chicago Bulls without Jimmy Butler. It's going to be a little bit of a tighter game. You know, you have still a better team in the Miami Heat, one that's star-studded with guys like Bam Adebayo, who made the Team USA stacked roster. Very, very good. You have a Bulls team with Kobe White coming off a career game, scoring 42 points to make it past the Hawks in the first play-in game to advance to this winner-go-home for the 8th seed. The Bulls play the Heat. I expect the Heat to still win this game. Again, not having Jimmy Butler in playoff time is going to be a huge, huge loss for them. And I don't want to underestimate how much of a loss it's going to be for a team like the Heat that love to rely on him. You know, even in a game where he got hurt in the first quarter, he still played 40 minutes. It's going to be a lot of minutes that you're going to need to fill with the bench. You're going to need the bench to go a lot deeper than it did in their last game, where there wasn't really too much contribution off of the bench versus the 76ers. There was plenty of contribution from the starters, but you're going to need people outside of Tyler Hero and outside of Bam to step up if you would like to advance in this round. You know, you don't have your star, which really sucks, but I do still expect the Heat to pull it out. I think the Heat are just flat out a better team than Chicago. Now, if Chicago shoots 60% from the field again, like they did against the Hawks, it's going to be, you know, a much, much different story than if they come back down to earth and shoot normally. It's going to be a lot harder to beat them, and they've shown recently in their last game that they have the ability to put up these numbers. They have the ability to win this game with their shooting just from the outside, from their efficiency from the field. So, like I said, without Jimmy Butler, it's going to be a much harder game than anticipated. But I do expect that the Heat are going to be able to pull this one out and move on to face the Boston Celtics, which, without Jimmy Butler, I don't think they stand much of a chance in. The Heat have been a thorn in the Celtics' side for a very long time now. You know, you go back to last year, they eliminate them. The year before, I believe they eliminated them. It's been the hump that the Celtics have really struggled to get over, is the Miami Heat. You know, you can go all the way back to when LeBron was on the Heat. Now, back then it was a little bit different of a dynamic, but still the same. The Heat have been a thorn in the Celtics' side for quite some time at this point, and I think this is the year to do it. You know, Not having Jimmy Butler is really, really going to hurt this Heat team. Now, in a world where the Bulls end up winning this matchup, I think the Celtics take that in 5. I'll give the Bulls a game. Uh, if the Heat win without Jimmy Butler, I think the Celtics take it in 6. I think the Heat are good enough that they can take a game or two, but I don't think that without Jimmy Butler, they stand much of a chance at all at getting anything significant done against a team like the Boston Celtics. Heading over to the Western Conference, though, for this play-in game, you have the Kings taking on the Pelicans. The Kings and Pelicans, the Kings coming off a huge win against the Golden State Warriors, where, you had great shooting from the outside. Great shooting. The Pelicans don't have Zion. And the Pelicans have been dominant against the Kings all season, and that might be a factor, but if Keegan Murray can hit 9 threes, 8 threes, whatever he hit like he did against the Warriors, it's going to be tough. You go and you look at their performances. Zion Williamson put up 40. He's not going to be there. Your leading scorer is not going to be on the court in an elimination game, and that's never where you want to be. This is a game where Zion Williamson really could have just out physical Domantas Sabonis down low, and unfortunately not having Zion is really going to hurt their chances to win this game. Now, looking at ESPN, Matchup Predictor still has the Pelicans favored to win this matchup. 64% says they're going to win. But without Zion, I know if you look at the regular season, they were winning these games by an average margin of like 20 points, and that is basically the same as Zion, is what Zion's putting up. So it should be a close game if we're going by what their previous matchups this season have been with each other. But the Kings coming off a night where they shot the lights out, where Keegan Murray could not miss. If he does that again, and CJ McCollum can't pick up if CJ McCollum, and it really comes down to if CJ McCollum can be productive. You have Jose Alvarado coming off the bench. He was a really big spark plug down the stretch of that game against the Lakers. New Orleans without Zion really just needs scoring. They need CJ McCollum to be efficient. They need Brandon Ingram in his limited minutes to be efficient. He only has those limited minutes. The coaches need to be very selective. I won't say selective. They need to be very careful with how they're using him if they're going to continue to put him on a minutes restriction, which I completely understand, health of the player, but at a certain point, you don't want him sitting in clutch time like he was against the Lakers. And I don't expect him to do it, even if he hits his minutes. If there's a situation like there was against the Lakers where it's a tie game with 3 minutes left, you throw him in there for the last 3 minutes. 3 minutes isn't going to kill him. And then you just go a little bit lighter in game 1 of the next series when you take on the Thunder, which is going to be a tough series for both of these teams. The Thunder, I think a healthy Pelicans team matches up better than the Kings, but we are looking at a team that won't have Zion. And we don't know exactly how bad that hamstring injury is for Zion, so maybe they win. There's a chance he comes back in the first round of the playoffs. But as it stands right now, I just don't really see a world where the Pelicans pull this out without Zion. And the way that the Kings were playing, their determination against the Warriors, I expect them to carry that over and win this game, defeating the Pelicans, knocking them out of the playoffs. And now the Kings going to face the Oklahoma City Thunder. Again, not a great matchup. And I think this is a kind of matchup where Oklahoma City might even sweep. And it's nothing against the Kings. The Kings are a very, very good roster. 46 wins. They did come off a 48-win season. They're not as good in the clutch as they were last season. And you see how good this Western Conference is. losing 2 more games than you did last year drops you down from a top 3 seed to a bottom to the ninth seed. They dropped 6 seeds in 2 wins, so it's a very stacked West, and I just don't see either of these teams really making it too much further past the Oklahoma City Thunder. I do think that the Kings are going to be able to pull this one out. This should be a very close game, though. I expect the Heat to win pretty handily, and the Kings to win in a very narrow game. Comes down to the last kind of shot, which they haven't been very good at this season, but in playoff time, I feel like they'll revert back to last season when they were winning all these clutch games. I believe in the Kings, if only because Zion is not playing. And that included with a lack of 100% Brandon Ingram, and CJ McCollum being up in the air with his efficiency is just it's not signs are pointing to the Kings right now. So I'm going to take my signs and I'm going to take the Kings here. Coming up in the next segment, we are going to transition out of basketball, move into some hockey. We're going to talk a little bit about the NHL Eastern Conference and then the NHL Western Conference. We're going to go through game series by series and break down exactly what's going to happen in the first round of the NHL playoffs. So stick around for that. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, getting my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we just finished breaking down the NBA play-in games that are happening tonight and what the first round for the 1 versus 8 seed might look like based on the champions that I had here, as well as the alternate reality, what that might look like as well. In this segment, the NHL is in full swing. The playoffs are going to start this weekend, same with the NBA, and the NHL playoffs are probably the best playoffs in all of sports. We are going to break the entirety of the NHL playoffs down for you. It should take most of the rest of the show, but we're going to start in the East. But before we do, remember, if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, everybody else around the world to see. You can control what we talk about here on the show. All you need to do, once again, is go to that link that is on the screen right now, gsmcpodcast.net, and leave that tip or donation. Any question, comment, concern that you might have, we will talk about that coming up whenever you leave that donation. But like I was saying, let's just get right into the NHL. The NHL Eastern Conference playoffs, we're going to start with that, and we're going to start at the top of the bracket. You have a Florida matchup that's happened almost multiple years in a row. You have you have teams from Florida last year, the year before. This time it's the Panthers taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Florida Panthers taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Tampa Bay Lightning, who are recently coming off a stretch of 3 straight Stanley Cup titles, and now they are a little bit on the decline. They still have a very good team. They get into the playoffs as the first wild card in the East, a wild card race that was crazy for that second wild card, and we'll talk about all of that. But this is a little bit of a flip of what we're usually used to. What's been powering Tampa Bay is that they've had the best goalie in the entire league. You know, you have a guy who consensus has been one of the best goalies in the whole world, and now it's a little bit flip flopped. You have the points leader Nikita Kucherov on Tampa Bay going up against the best goalie statistically by save percentage, by goals allowed average, in in shutouts as well. In all the good categories. In Florida's Anthony Stolarz, who's had really just an incredible season. You take a look at getting them this number one seed in their division, beating the Bruins and the Maple Leafs, who will match up as well, and we'll break that one down in just a second. But this matchup right here is really going to come down to old heads versus new heads. And at this point, with Florida's lack of defense, I know their goaltending is elite, and there's a reason that they're up there. But Tampa has that experience, not that Florida doesn't. I'm going to take Tampa in 7. I just don't think Florida's going to get over that hump. I think Tampa's got one more run left in them with Vasilevsky. He'll turn on playoff mode, and he'll get them at least one series in this one. This is going to be a fun matchup. Like I said, these two teams have matched up. It's been a bunch of really tight matchups as we go through it the last couple seasons. But I do have the Tampa Bay Lightning taking out the Florida Panthers in 7 games. The next matchup we're going to look at is between the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs, who finally won a series last year, only to get their hearts broken in the second round. They need to make runs soon. Austin Matthews isn't getting any younger. He's still got time, but they're really struggling to put pieces around him because of how expensive the team has gotten. You have multiple huge contracts making it harder and harder. Last year was probably their most talented roster, and now they get to go up against their old nemesis, the Boston Bruins, the team that for so many years consistently knocked them out of the playoffs in increasingly more and more heartbreaking ways. You think back to some of the most legendary moments in recent playoff history, it's Boston breaking Toronto's hearts in Game 7s. And now we have this matchup again. You have a team in Toronto led by one of the best pure scorers in NHL history, in Austin Matthews, led the league in goals once again. And that you're going up against a Boston team that, aside from center depth, is one of the most complete teams in hockey. You have one of the best defensive cores, you have one of the best goalie tandems, and you have some top line, some very top heavy forwards on Boston. It's when you start to get into depth that Boston's going to have a little bit of a concern. And it's the same thing with Toronto. I think this is why Boston got very lucky with this draw. I think if Boston ended up drawing Tampa or Florida in this matchup, it wouldn't have turned out the way it's going to turn out. I expect Boston to win this series again. I think this will go 7 games just because high-end talent is always going to steal a couple games in hockey. But really, when it comes down to this, it's going to be on depth. It's going to be all about the depth scoring. Can you produce without your top liners on the ice? Because you can't have these top guys on the ice for 40 minutes a game. It's just not something that's possible in ice hockey. And it also comes down to goaltending. I've got Boston has just better goaltending. And really, when it comes down to close series like this one, goaltending is going to be my tiebreaker. So we're taking a look at Linus Ullmark, Jeremy Swayman, who are both top 10 in most statistical categories for goalies. I'm taking Boston, again, in 7. It's going to be some crazy, heartbreaking fashion. But I do expect Boston to pull this one out, get a rematch with Tampa Bay in that second round. Halfway through the East at this point, we're going to move on to the Metropolitan Division. Top of the division, you have the New York Rangers, the President's Trophy winning Rangers, the team that had the best record in the entire NHL, taking on the Washington Capitals. My Washington Capitals, who just went on an insane run. At one point in January, they had about a 4% chance of making the playoffs. Now they are in the, if you weren't paying attention to hockey, the final wild card spot in the East, the one that the Capitals ended up taking, was a crapshoot. It went all the way down to the last games of the season. Washington was able to clinch it on a TJ Oshie goal, beating out Philly, who held that spot for most of the season before having a little bit of a collapse towards the end, allowing Washington, Pittsburgh, these teams to get back into the race. But now Washington draws the best team in the league in the Rangers. And the Rangers are built. They have that elite defenseman in Jack Fox. They have the elite goaltending in Igor Shesterkin. They have the top line offense, and they have the depth. You look at this on paper, it's a complete team. And you look at Washington, they're old. Alex Ovechkin leads the charge. He has been on a tear recently. Dylan Strome is putting up really quality minutes. Tom Wilson is... Everyone has their own opinions on Tom Wilson. As a Capitals fan, I love him. I think what he does, size and skill, and as an enforcer on the ice as well, is super valuable to the team. But almost every other fan base hates him, and with good reason. I completely understand it. And then the big kicker. You have Charlie Lindgren in goal for Washington, who in the back half of the season has been one of, if not the best goaltenders in the entire league. He leads the league in shutouts. He has 6, and he didn't really take over the starting role until this last couple months of the season when he really separated from Darcy Kemper. Darcy Kemper, who the Caps paid big money to come to after he led the Colorado Avalanche on a bit of a Stanley Cup run. This is a matchup where I'm going to try not to let my biases get into, but in hockey, and with a lot of sports like hockey, baseball, it's all about being being hot at the right time. And right now, the Capitals are hot. The Rangers have a history of not being able to put up offense in the playoffs. It's been what has held them back for quite some time. They've had some of the best goaltenders of all time. Henrik Lundqvist, the king, was in net for them for a very, very long time. And now you move on to who seems like he's going to take the torch as the next greatest goaltender, which Andrei Vasilevsky starts to go on a decline, in Igor Shesterkin, stud goaltender. And I'm very excited for this series because I think what the Capitals do well is part of the Rangers' weakness. And this series can go one of two ways. And it all depends on the play of Charlie Lindgren and Alex Ovechkin. If those two can continue the pace that they have been on for the last couple months, this stretch leading up to the playoffs, I think the Caps might be able to take this in 7. If they revert back to where they were in the beginning of the season, slow, not really getting anything done, the Rangers should be able to take this in 5. My official prediction is going to be Rangers in 6. But I do think that this is a series that you need to seriously put on upset watch, upset alert, because the Rangers have a history of not bringing their best offense to the playoffs. And that if the offense disappears, as good as that team is, they're not going to be able to win this series. The final series in the East between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Islanders is a really interesting one. Because again, the Islanders are another one of those teams that overtook the Flyers, overtook the Capitals to get into the playoffs down the stretch. They're another really hot team. They have really good goaltending. But you look at their opponent on the other side, the Carolina Hurricanes, it is a juggernaut. It is a team in the Hurricanes who has one of the best defensive cores in all of hockey, has the top line on offense and the depth to make a deep run. It's a tough draw for the Islanders. And I don't think this series is going to be particularly close. With everything in hockey, it comes down to goaltending. Every single night, you can go out there and the goalie can just put on the greatest show you've ever seen and be a brick wall. You know? It happens sometimes. I think the Carolina Hurricanes are just going to overwhelm the Islanders. And the Islanders play a slower pace of hockey, but the Hurricanes, I think, are just too much. I think they're going to overpower them. I think Carolina is going to win this series in 5 games. Those are my picks for the East. We can continue through this. I think Carolina is going to beat the Rangers or the Caps, whoever comes out of that series. And I think Boston is going to be able to take care of Tampa in the second round, setting up Boston, Carolina, where I think this is where the center depth of Boston is really going to be what kills them, because they don't have a lot of center depth. Carolina is coming out of the East for me. I have them taking on a mystery Western Conference team in the Stanley Cup Finals. I will talk about the Western Conference playoffs coming up next. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you were just tuning in, we've just finished breaking down the Eastern Conference in the NHL playoff bracket. I have the Carolina Hurricanes coming out of that. If you want to hear a more detailed breakdown, go back and listen to my breakdowns for each of the first round series. We are going to move on to the Western Conference, though, in this segment. Before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen. You can control what we talk about here on the show. You leave that message at gsmcpodcast.net. I'll answer whatever questions you have. You can control the segment. Once again, that link to leave a tip or donation is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to finish off the NHL playoff prediction. We're going to move on to the Western Conference playoffs. The Western Conference looks a little bit different than the Eastern Conference. There wasn't a huge big race at the bottom of the conference or in one of those divisions. It all kind of was pretty much locked up for a large stretch of the season. But we'll start at the top. You have the Dallas Stars taking on the defending champions, Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights had a little bit of a disappointing season coming off a championship. They're all the way down there in that last wild card. They just snuck into the playoffs. They get a tough draw, and honestly, what might be my favorite team in these playoffs in the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars are incredibly deep. They have one of my favorite goaltenders, incredibly fun to watch and athletic, in Jake Ottinger. The defensive core is stacked, the offensive core is stacked, and they have the depth to go all the way down to the third and fourth line and still put up points against you. Vegas is very similarly deep. They are high end on offense, and their defense kind of struggles a little bit sometimes. But Aiden Hill went on his magical run last season to win them a cup. There's no reason he can't do it again. These two teams are very similar in the fact that they're super deep. And I think that Vegas could make a lot more noise in the playoffs than a typical 8 seed if they weren't matched up against Dallas. Dallas, like I said, is probably my favorite to win the Stanley Cup. They are just so good. And their offense is there. That's what's been missing for some time. They, a couple years ago, had goaltending, had the defense, didn't have the offense. Then they added the offense, and they didn't have the depth. And now they have the depth. They're a complete team. I have this series going 7 games, and Dallas taking it over the Golden Knights in 7. The next series to face Dallas in round 2 is going to be between the Winnipeg Jets and the Colorado Avalanche. The Colorado Avalanche, who have probable MVP Nathan MacKinnon on their roster. Nathan MacKinnon had an incredible season. Nathan MacKinnon has been a wonder for the Avalanche all year, and going up against a team like Winnipeg, who has Connor Hellebuyck, who's been back to his former self, back to his Vezina winning days. He's been so good this season. And, their offense finally started going. Again, I hate to bring it back to this, but goaltending. In hockey, goaltending is what is going to save your life. It's what's going to kill you. Live and you die by goaltending. You could have the greatest roster of all time around you, but if you have a piece of paper and net, it's not going to mean anything. You're not going to be able to make a difference because you got to have that guy to stop the shots. And when it comes down to this series between Winnipeg and Colorado, that's really what I'm looking at. And when you have Connor Hellebuyck, he's going to be able to get you a couple wins, and I think that's going to push him over the edge. Colorado has been pretty injured, pretty banged up all season, which also does not help their case. But Winnipeg is going to move on. I think this is going to be a 6-game series with Winnipeg advancing to face the Dallas Stars in the second round. Making our way down to the bottom half of the Western Conference bracket, you have the Vancouver Canucks taking on the Nashville Predators. The Nashville Predators, who just were kind of solid all season. Vancouver finally had that breakout year. For those who have been following hockey for some time, know that Vancouver has been that team that's been primed to break out for years now. Every single offseason, there are analysts saying, hey, this is Vancouver's year. Demko's going to stay healthy. They're going to stay healthy. They're going to be good. They're going to win it all. They're going to make the playoffs and go on their little run. And they finally put it all together this season. And we got to see a revelation. We got to see exactly what all these people have been talking about with the Vancouver Canucks for quite some time. It's been very impressive. Very much been time for this to happen. But you take a look at a team like Nashville, a team that doesn't really have depth. They have UC Saros in goal. They have a really top-heavy defense. Ryan O'Reilly is there. And, again, top-heavy. They can make some noise. I don't think this series is going to be particularly close. The West is much more of a top-heavy conference. You have these clear-cut teams that are just better than other teams. So Vancouver, I think, will take this in 5. Not super duper close, I don't think. Vancouver should move on to the second round. And the final series of the first round for us to break down between Edmonton and the Los Angeles Kings. The Los Angeles Kings and the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers, who have Connor McDavid, McJesus on their squad, Leon Draisaitl, Vander Kane, they put it all together after firing their coach. They started off abysmal. They were saying they were in danger of not making the playoffs, and now they get the Kings in the first round for, I believe, the third or fourth year in a row. And the Kings and the Oilers are built very similarly. I like to call the Kings Edmonton Light, where they don't quite have that star power that Edmonton has, but they are built very similarly. You know, they're trotting out Kevin Fiala. They're lots of really solid guys, but nothing like Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl or Vander Kane. These guys aren't out there on those top lines for the Los Angeles Kings, and I think that's what we've seen the last couple seasons in these matchups. The Kings just don't quite have the juice to make it over the top, and I don't think this year is going to be any different. I think if you're looking at the two different you look at the matchups year to year, the Kings in the first time they matched up probably had the best shot, but Edmonton is just getting more and more solid at their weaknesses, which is defense and goaltending. And this is going to be a really, really fun series to just turn on and watch, because this is the kind of series that you're going to see 6-4 in hockey, which that does not happen. There's not going to be too much defense, too much crazy goaltending, although I do expect Edmonton to take this series in 6. The Kings just, I don't think, have quite enough to push themselves over the top of a team like in Edmonton. So that sets up a fun matchup in the second round, at least at the top, between the Dallas Stars and the Winnipeg Jets. Both of these teams are really good. I think the winner of that series is going to end up winning the entire Stanley Cup. This is, again, projecting out. If this is to happen, this would be my favorite matchup of the entire playoffs, just because I think these are probably two of the better teams. Now, a Dallas-Vancouver series would be a lot of fun, but that's way too far out to actually project confidently. I do think that in this scenario that I've painted for you here, that Dallas, with its depth, is going to be able to outlast Winnipeg in 7. That's a lot of physical game. This is going to be a much more physical series than the ones that either of these teams were in before. It's going to take a toll, and it might open up an opportunity for a team from the bottom of the bracket to make the Stanley Cup Finals. From the bottom of the bracket, I think Vancouver will just breeze by Edmonton. Thatcher Demko has shown the ability to shut down anybody on any given night, and I think that's going to make the difference. Vancouver has been really, really good this season, and I expect them to take care of Edmonton in 6, which sets up, again, another really fun matchup between the Stars and the Canucks in the Western Conference Finals. The Stars get beat up. If they get beat up a little too much against Winnipeg, I think it'll be tough. I love the Stars. I think they're my Stanley Cup favorites right now, but they have a much harder path than almost any other team. They might have the hardest path in the entire NHL to make it. The Winnipeg, Colorado, Vegas, Dallas, that little grouping right there, that is the hardest group to get out of, and because of that, I think that Vancouver is going to go to the Stanley Cup Final and take on the Carolina Hurricanes. In that series, that possible series, I think Vancouver takes it. This is their year. They finally showed up. It's been long enough. I think Thatcher Demko goes on a run and shows why he is one of the most underrated goalies in all of hockey, leading Vancouver to a Stanley Cup championship for the first time in forever. The Lord Stanley returns to Canada for the first time in more than 20 years. So that's my prediction. Vancouver wins the Stanley Cup. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. we are, in our next segment, going to close out the show talking a little bit about the NFL. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks, the new news that's come out surrounding Jaden Daniels, and what that might mean for the order of the draft coming up next week. So stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the NHL playoffs. We picked a champion, went through the Eastern and the Western conferences, as well as breaking down the NBA playoffs, the play-in games, and what the 8 seed versus 1 seed matchups might look like after tonight. In this fourth and final segment, we're going to transition into the NFL, talk a little bit about Jaden Daniels and the new news surrounding him today. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will show up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say. You can control what we talk about here on the podcast. All you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, our fourth and final segment, we're going to close out the week with a little bit of draft talk, a little bit of Jaden Daniels draft talk. Jaden Daniels had his final visit with the Commanders this weekend, or today, I believe. It was not good. There have been rumors all draft cycle saying Jaden Daniels is connected to the Commanders. They're going to take him over Drake May. And after today, it just doesn't seem like that way. The agent is publicly beefing with the Washington Commanders, and the Washington Commanders GM Adam Peters has been very tight-lipped about who they are picking with their second overall pick in the draft. There's been rumors of so many names. J.J. McCarthy has wound up in there for a little bit. Drake May, Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels was the favorite going into this morning. That has switched and flip-flopped to Drake May, who was the favorite going into the beginning of the draft cycle before all of this really started. All of this information, it's like a mine to get through when you're talking about the NFL draft and its information and the status of all that stuff. You get plenty of different thoughts out there. You get plenty of different just throwaway lines that people delve way too much into, or just straight up lies go out there sometimes. Sometimes people just tell you the exact opposite thing of what they're planning on doing. There is so much misinformation, and you have to dig through all of it. So we start to get better nuggets of information, or worse, more outlandish stuff that can really make the draft a crapshoot that it is, just because of how curious people are and how tight-lipped all these GMs and scouts are about this, because it's such a disadvantage if everyone knows exactly what you're doing. Unless you're the number 1 overall pick, and they can't do anything about it. But Jaden Daniels is in an interesting position, because after today, it's basically confirmed that he's not going to Washington. And the Patriots don't have a super big commitment to a guy like Jaden Daniels. There's a chance that if the Patriots decide they like a J.J. McCarthy more than a Jaden Daniels, how far does he fall? because obviously the Cardinals aren't taking a quarterback. The Chargers aren't taking a quarterback. Maybe we see some trades, but in a scenario where there are no trades, I don't see the Giants taking a quarterback, although a lot of people do. I just don't think you can justify taking a quarterback at 6 after paying Daniel Jones $80 million. You get to a situation where he starts to get into a free fall, a little bit of a plummet. Jaden Daniels does. You have now a situation where Jaden Daniels can fall from the number 2 overall pick all the way out of the top 10 to 11 to the Vikings. And if he gets to 11, I expect the Vikings to take him there, because I don't think and if the Vikings don't do that, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that he does not get past the Broncos. So I think he could slip all the way down to 12, which is a huge drop. 10 whole spots. It's not going to be like Aaron Rodgers dropping to 24 or Will Levis dropping to the 3rd round, or all these famous situations with quarterbacks falling all the way out of rounds, waiting days in the green room. I do expect him to go no later than 12 to the Broncos. But there is a world where he doesn't go in the top 10. He doesn't go in the top 5. He could fall all the way to 12. And it really shines a light on how skeptical you have to be in draft coverage, especially if you don't have those primary inside sources, because nobody knows what's going on. It's all speculation. It's all word of mouth. You just have to trust it. And there's plenty of people that are just throwing stuff out there to lie. I think what Jim Harbaugh is doing with J.J. McCarthy, his former quarterback at Michigan. I think he's really hyping him up, trying to get a team to jump him, trade maybe even. Trade with the Cardinals so that they can get a guy like a Marvin Harrison. There's all this chess that these coaches and GMs and players are playing, and the media plays a part in it. Information is a weapon as much as it is as much as we like to know what is true. It's a weapon. If something enters the public consciousness and people take it as fact, it can sway the whole draft. There's a reason that guys like Zach Wilson jump all the way to number 2 in these drafts sometimes. Information can be used as an attack, as a defense. It's really interesting the way that information is gathered and given out surrounding the NFL in the draft cycle. But Jaden Daniels' stock takes a little bit of a hit, and it's kind of in the air where he goes now. He could have a free fall. Maybe he goes all the way to 23. Maybe. I don't see him falling out of the first round. I don't think it's quite that dire. But there is a world where he goes a lot further back than he expects. And if you look at some of the numbers, it's not exactly that surprising. He had the best receiving core in college football, and he wasn't super accurate. He didn't target the middle of the field really that much. It was basically all on the outside to your big weapons. There's positives, there's negatives. I think he can still be a very, very good quarterback in the NFL. His ability to have that dual threat, to make defenders miss, to deal with contact. He is very tough. He takes huge, huge hits, which is a positive and a negative. He has the ability to bounce back from those hits, but also he takes them. And he takes them way too much. So there's a lot of things to deal with, especially when you're spending that big of an asset on a quarterback who you expect to be the face of your franchise for the next 15 years. You got to do your due diligence. You got to make sure you get the right guy. So there's a lot out there, lots of stuff to think about. I do expect him to go 3 to the Patriots, but there is a world where he falls all the way down to 12, which is pretty crazy. But anyway. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I will be back here on Monday, same time, same place. I will see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.